Right. Yeah.
If you want to say your age, where you're based now, where you're coming from, a little warming.
Me a typical black woman, I tell nobody me age, you know. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone. What a blessed grand rising we have. And we live to see another day. And that's good. That's good. I woke up this morning talking to the Creator. I said talking to the Creator. I have an unholy relationship with the Creator. And I'm one of God's wayward children. And I envision God, the Creator, as this. I can see him sometimes or her holding his or her hands in their head saying, "Oh, she will not behave herself because I wasn't sent here to behave myself." It took me a long time to admit to that I was sent here for whatever purpose, but it certainly was not to behave myself. So I've been a priest a long time. You may or may not know that I was the first black woman to be ordained in the Church of England. It's been a difficult journey, but one I wouldn't have done without, because we're not done with them yet.
Okay, so good morning, Reverend.
Good morning. Good morning.
Honor to be with you this morning.
It's an honor being in your presence. I've admired you from a distance for a long time.
Give thanks, it's an honor to be here. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you first come here?
I was about 11 when I came here. So I was a child and bewildered child. I always maintained that I was very bewildered as a child. I remember running up and down on the plane, and coming to meet a mother I haven't seen and didn't remember. It was a traumatic time. I found it very traumatizing, actually, coming from a relatively comfortable home, from a boarding school background. Was very traumatizing.
Can you remember what year that was?
It's early. It's in the 60s, mid 60s. Yeah.
And was it by plane, boat?
By plane. By plane. Yeah.
And what really brought you here? Was it your parents?
My mother was here. My mother hated being in England, and from the moment I landed, I realized she did. She came from a good home. I'm not just saying that. And my grandfather sent me to a very good boarding school. And so I came to England and was exposed before I know it to its roughness and its rough edges. And I hated it. I didn't like the coarseness of the English who surrounded me at the time. Or even my own people who looked like me I found difficult, because when you go to a boarding school in Jamaica, it's unless you've experienced boarding school in any way, you will not totally understand what it was like to come from that environment where, you had Jamaican. I can't say anything about Jamaican broader education system, because the only part I knew was going to a private school, and people might think that's a show off, but I couldn't tell you what the ordinary schools were like, because that's the only thing I knew. So I went to a school with middle-class black people. So when I came here, I couldn't settle. I felt totally out of my depth with the whole culture. I found the people I was surrounded by very rough. So my mother used to say, "Don't me see you with those people there, because if I was in Jamaica, I wouldn't talk to them. That's why I should come to England and talk to them."
Before we came here, we were told that England paved with gold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when we come here, we were asking where is the gold, where them take you walking on. Okay, but it was just a maybe joke, I don't know. And when we came here, get off the plane in Gatwick, we see these houses with the chimney out there, and the smoke was coming out. And we said, oh, lot of work is here, because we thought it was factory. But when we come and get to understand it was the dwelling house, and they were burning coal, not these fire, they were coal. They buy coal and have the fireplace, make it up with wood and burn it. But as time went on, they get civilized. They have gas fire and central heating and all that. But when we came here, it wasn't like this. It was completely different England. But after black people come here and we start working, and they get clementized to whatever, things change.
Your background prepare you for life in the UK? I mean,
It didn't.
What did you know about the UK prior to coming?
Oh, I mean, I was trained to be a little English girl because when you go to private school in Jamaica, that's what they do. But of course, you don't know it at the time. You think that's normal, you know. So I sang, when I came, I knew lots of English folk songs. And, you know, the Owl and the Pussycat went to see the beautiful pea green boat, because I was surrounded by white people and middle-class black people in that school setting. And I never questioned it. I still don't, because at the time, that's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. So when I came, I was just totally out of place and couldn't settle. And I'm still not sure whether I had settled, but that set me up for what that gave me was lots of confidence. You know, when you're in that kind of background, for all its problems, you know, because you grew up with servant, at the time you don't question it. Why would you? You're a child. For me, that was normal. You know, I had the maid who came to pick me up from school. So I never questioned that. And I won't beat myself up about it, because that was all that I knew. And, you know, we played the piano, and my grandfather sat in his study. I didn't know it was called a study, but he sat there at his desk, because he was a bright man. It was very dark. I remember loving his darkness.
So how was it, I mean, during your school years here in the UK?
I didn't like school here at all. Didn't like it.
Were you able to stay connected with your Jamaican roots, your Jamaican culture?
No. Well, only in the sense that I had deep confidence in being a black girl, little black girl. And I knew I was bright from a very young child, because I was told by the head teacher that I would go far. And then when I came to England, it was just, the education system was just appalling. It was rough. I was surrounded by rough people. I don't like you. If you're rough, black or white, I'm not comfortable with you. I don't know how to change that. So I found England very rough, and it's the kind of people, white people, that I didn't like. I took an instant dislike to, not because they're white, but because they were rough. And I found some of my own people difficult, because my mother came from a nice background. It wasn't perfect, but nice, you know.
Yes, when we came here, a lot of teddy boys, them was here, bad boy them. When you look at them, they wear these black shoes, and then the front of the shoes was long like my finger, and these tight up trousers. They said they were teddy boy.
So what was that about?
They just bad.
Okay, beat up people bad.
What they call it today is gang.
Okay.
They call it what they call gang today.
Okay.
But in our time when you come 60, they used to call them teddy boy.
Okay. So they would beat up black people?
Well, they wouldn't respect of no one. Anyone they see and they feel to attack them. They just attack them.
So did they trouble older people as well?
No, I never heard of it. I never heard of the trouble black people. It all depends. I never heard of anyone anyway that teddy boy really fool around. I don't know.
Because my mother came from a nice background. It wasn't perfect, but nice, you know. So I found England from a very early age very difficult. I was very lonely, very isolated. Didn't know how how to find joy. I really wanted to return to Jamaica because when you're a child, you just have to do as you're told. But if I had the know-how, I would have gone back to Jamaica. But I would have gone back to what I left behind, this boarding school environment and Teacher Brown and Mr. and Mrs. Brown and, sort of that kind of genteel. But I realize now that they were training me to be an English woman, really. And that's how the Jamaican middle class system works, whether we like it or not. It's a middle class system that I lived in that shaped me to be who I am today, for good or for ill. That's how it's been.
What does the word Windrush mean to you?
I haven't got a clue. I don't know what it means, this Windrush. I don't know if it's because we come here in the 60s or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what it meant. I would have to ask what Windrush means. I can give a meaning. Let me see. I don't know what Windrush means. What it for? What it signifies for when we come here, or because of when England opened, we take in the what you call it, Commonwealth people. Then I don't know. Or if because of, as I said before, if it's because the men them come here what they call banana boat. I don't know if it means that, I don't know. So I can give no illustration of Windrush people, what it meant. But it should have a meaning, but I don't know.
It just says something about that they haven't communicated it to the older generation. But, okay.
But it was horrible when we came here, very horrible. Let me see. You have to rent to it. All these houses, somebody wouldn't able to live in a house. We always have to rent room from landlord. 1 bedroom.
Yeah.
You have to do everything in it. Everything, you cook your food, you have to go in it, go share, and it was horrible.
So how did you find these landlords? How did you find the landlords?
I didn't find landlord, When I came here, I came to them, Illy and them dad. So he would already live at his uncle's house.
Okay.
You see, so I never rent nowhere. Because I leave Jamaica, come here to a boyfriend. Okay.
Yeah.
See, so that was it.
I grew up in this fabulous household of intelligent black men. Maybe that's why I have high regard for black men. I know some of them behave badly, and there's no denying that. But I grew up in this household at a time when black people rent rooms and live in the same space, and I was the only little child in the house, so I had all the attention of the adults, and there was a handful of black men who lived there. They were bright, and I was enthralled by them, absolutely enthralled by these men who would go out and buy the paper. And there was one we used to call him, I thought his name was Prime Minister, but that's what the adults called him. And I thought, as a child, oh, well, that must be his name. And then I used to say, "Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister." But later I realized his name was Albert, actually. It's been long dead, but deep, very intelligent man, and he would spread out all the newspapers on wherever he could find it, on any surface that was available. And he would just go through it methodically on a Sunday morning and talk about politics. So I grew up hearing these black men talk about politics, and that just ignited something in me. Whoops! And I looked forward to not going to church, but to actually going downstairs and hearing these black men talk about the political realities of the late 60s and the early 70s. And they would talk about it in a way that, and if I didn't understand, and Mr. Albert was very good because he said, "You're a bright little girl," because I would go and ask him questions. Those are the things that's really inspired me, made me politically conscious from a very early age. And so when all my friends, the people I went to school with, I'm sure they must have thought I was a weird child. Because when they were doing other things, I went to the Black People's Freedom Movement, and I used to hide behind the door, to hear them talk about Malcolm X and Angela Davis and Stokely, Carmichael, who is now Kwame Ture. And, so I grew up hearing the adults around me and the people whom I thought was much brighter than I am talk about these political heroes and heroines. And so that helped to train me into being politically conscious. And I've since recently been told that my grandfather was a very political man. Somebody said to me, "You're like your grandfather." No, the Pocomania movement is very significant and important in Jamaican religious development and religious journey of faith. And like everything we've had in the Caribbean, certainly in the Jamaican context, but I think in the Caribbean in particular, it's been demonized. And we're told it's not good enough and it's of the devil. And if you're a Christian, you can't be a Pocomania. But my grandmother was a Pocomania woman, and they had a strong political leaning. So they weren't apolitical. And so at the time, the Jamaican government was working under the direction of the British government to delete and obliterate everything that we have that was remotely African. But as I get older, I'm really, really proud of my grandmother, who comes to me, in her spirit. I sense her spirit even in this room. She's come to visit me, visit our Grand Pitney, and whom she's loved, and she knows how important that is for me to say, "Welcome, Grandma," because she was a spiritual Pocomania woman, strong spiritual African spirituality. And I preached about it in church about 5 years ago. I said, "You needn't hold on your head and pretend you don't know what Pocomania is." Pocomania is part of the Jamaican religious culture. And I'm just blessed to have had my grandmother who was a Pocomania. But my grandfather was a typical middle-class black man on my mother's side, who was very much of that kind of faith of the opposite, nothing African remotely. But he was very conscious as well of his Africanness.
We give thanks for your knowledge. These are pockets of information that we need to share with our generations, and we need to develop on that in the future, so that ones like yourself can give that historical ancestral context to our younger generations. Who would you say was your greatest inspiration coming up?
People alive now, or in the past, Baldwin. James Baldwin has been, during the lockdown, when I was a young person, when I was a young woman, I read all of James Baldwin's books. But when the lockdown came, 2019, and the Black Lives Movement, it rekindled that passion for this prophetic message that Baldwin had and has and left for black people. It doesn't mean that because he's an American that he has nothing to say to us in our British context. In fact, I think when I get a bit older and get more time, I should say, really, I'm going to form a James Baldwin group, because I think James Baldwin's writing has much to say to us in our British context, where we still struggle with chain around our feet and around our head. Bob Marley said, "The chains are off my feet, but they're around my head." And some of us, many of us, more than I care to remember, have the chains around our heads. And for me, Baldwin speaks to that. He speaks about his own struggles with his humanity, with his sexuality, with the American politics. And I think he has much to say, to speak to us in our British context, where we are still behaving, many of us, as if we are still in chains. And that's why I love Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, because for me they use as a common vehicle of the book in Baldwin's case, the microphone in Peter Tosh's Burning Spear and all those guys and culture, who gives us profound words in their writing, in their singing, in their musical arrangement, of the passion and the spirituality of our people. And for me, Bob Marley tells the story of our people with such ease, with such confidence. And Ralph Ellison speaks of the invisibility of the black man. You know, a society which wants to render black man invisible. And the only time they become visible is when we can denigrate them. And we join in that at our peril. So for me, at the moment, I haven't heard of anybody that, you know, I want to embrace with such passion. I'm not saying that there aren't. There are some good writers out there. But God is Not White is a very good one that springs to mind. And God is Not a White Man springs to mind. There are some good young writers coming up. And I think we can't afford to ignore these new voices that we have. So there's some really good stuff out there. There's a good one we're talking at the moment, What My Mama Didn't Tell Me About Love, is by a black woman, about her struggles to find love and peace and in some sense passion, the passion of love, which we soil sometimes with just sexual innuendos. This is beautifully written, and we have a group of us in church on the Sunday after service. We sit down and we talk about the bruises of the black experience. And I'm sure when I leave here, whenever that is, they'll be glad to see the back of me, because I will not allow them to forget about the scars that we carry of black humanity. So yeah, for me, those books, but the books that, and Maya Angelou, you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies, but still I rise, I rise. And we need people with passion. We don't need anybody at the moment who can't make their mind up whether they want to be black or not. It's not the time for it. These are serious times we're living in. And you might say, and you're quite right to say, that it's always been a serious time. Of course it has, There's never been a time when black people have not had to fight for the air we breathe, because there is something that is stifling about living the life of a black person. It wants to choke you. And I'm a poet, I write poetry. And there's this choking experience that I have from time to time, where the society in which I live wants to choke me and take away my words from me. And I started suffering from a thyroid issue, and I remember getting up and thinking, I will not allow you to take my voice, because that's what you really want, isn't it? And so I fought that hypothyroidism, and I'm still fighting it, because black women, when we internalize our pain and our anger and our rage, which we're not supposed to have, we've got to be really nice and calm and pretend that all is well. And it turns on us. And it's turned on me. So I started getting ill. Thyroidism that was threatening to take my voice. Because our voices are dangerous when it's about liberation.
So what would you deem as your greatest challenge that you faced along your journey?
To be heard. I just feel locked up in here and sort of thinking, this is going to be really arrogant. I'd love to lead my people. Mino said them might find me hard work, but I'd love to say, wake up time. Wake up time. We don't need no cowards around us. We need people who are unafraid. And I mean unafraid. Because as long as we keep frightened and, Lord, I don't want nobody hurt me, we've got to be a people who stop being afraid to live and afraid to die. That's where I am. And it might sound strange coming from a woman who is a minister. We've got to be able to find the confidence that we have a right on this planet, We weren't born, we weren't created to be victims on this gorgeous planet that the Creator made. I don't want to worship any God that creates me to be a victim. Oh, gosh, the words start in me, that does.
And, obviously, ancestrally, we wouldn't be here
Oh, gosh.
being understanding on the shoulders
Absolutely.
of our
Okay.
ancestors.
Yeah.
What can you share with us about our great ancestral energies?
And the more I learn about African history and our history, the more I realize how little I know. Education is that, and I look at the Asian Revolution, the 1860 around about there, the Asian Revolution, when they rise up against the French, and we only hear the victimization of black people. And we hear about the sort of feeling that somehow we as a people are permanent victims of racism, and of course we are. The Windrush, I remember my mother going up the stairs in the Windrush generation experience, going up the stairs, and she says, "Me come to England," because she came in the 1950s. "Me come to England, and me work like everybody else. We work and live in a bad condition. And now you come ask me to pay for citizenship. How dare you?" When Margaret Thatcher did it in the 70s. And we've been victims, and them throw them cans, says Bob Marley, in a call no foul. Them throw them few pounds and we go running and picking it up and asking them for it. They owe it to us, we don't have to beg them, and that's why I've never done anything about the Windrush. I've never gone and applied for anything. I saw my mother's generation reapply for citizenship, apply and pay the government when they come here and work their asses off, and you're telling them to buy their citizenship. I know why some of them did it, and I know why we asked for compensation. But I've never wanted to, and it's a personal decision, because I know that this is yet again another example of us being humiliated by them, by the oppressor, by those who look down upon us. And when Bob Marley said him throw him in a corner foul, it is so easy for us to react to what they want, to their demands on us. Come and apply for it and claim it. Come and apply for it and claim. And I understand why we do that. Part of my brain gets it. But I think it's yet another example of those who put themselves up to be better than us, to be our superior, once again manipulate how we respond. We've got to start reacting to their deep-seated loving of themselves and their loathing of us. And when we start doing that, we can set our own agenda, not have it set for us.
And in terms of honoring our ancestors,
well,
yeah, every year
yes,
you honor.
Absolutely. 8 years ago, 9 years ago, I was in my bed, and I had this overwhelming sense of, I could hear drums, and I didn't dare tell anybody because I was frightened that they would think I was going off my head, And I thought, I'm sure I can hear drums. I'm sure I can hear voices. And I'm thinking, what was this? And I jumped up, and I realized it was a dream. But I had this deep feeling that the ancestors were around me. And up until then, I had not thought about it deeply. And I rang a group of people, and we met in the hall. And I said, we have to remember our ancestors, half expecting them to say, "What are you talking about, Reverend Eve?" But they said, "Reverend Eve, that sounds brilliant." And it just flowed out of me. Arise and honor your ancestors. And I got a lot of criticism from a lot of people who said I was worshipping Satan. I was worshipping the dead. I have to say I even had Pentecostal ministers who look down their nose on me because I wasn't a proper Christian. Those people will remain nameless, but it was very isolating time around here. And I felt I was treated like some kind of outside fool who's coming and who she thinks she is, kind of stuff. But I stuck to my guns, and the first service we had here, it was so packed, it was like sardines. It was packed, there were people, Rastaman standing like this against the wall. And I said, Miss Sarah, I don't have nowhere to make for you to sit. And I said, Reverend Eve, may we stand here all night if we have to. And we have, one of the big problems I find with us is that we start things and we can't finish it. We soon give it up, many of us, and it's dropped by the way. No. I sat outside on the 1st of August every year, even if it's just me, but some of the drummers come and sit with me sometime, and 1 or 2 people from church come and sit with me. And we sit there to remind this community that into which I'm so privileged to be born into. And people think I'm really strange when I say that. And every morning I get up and I think, gosh, I'm born a black woman. What a privilege, Queen Nzinga, I'm teasing them, But for me, the ancestor and the services that I have every year, I don't charge anybody. You come in and you come and you just be part of it. Because a people, and this is not my quote, but a people who forget their past, says Marcus Garvey, is like a tree, I'm paraphrasing it, that is without roots and will eventually die. And we better wake up, because as long as we don't know who we are, Africa will suffer. And the ancestors are real. The ancestors are not dopey. We call them dopey. Dopey is a derogatory term that's been used. But actually, it's as the spirits of our ancestors is really very important. And dopey and whatever you want to call them, for me, as a black woman, even when me not, me all, wherever I am, there will be an ancestor service where we sit down and we call to mind all them gone back from Egyptian days, from all the men and women of Africa. And the problem with sometimes is that you can idealize your culture. Well, everybody else idealizes their culture. Why can't we do it? The service is coming up in 10 days' time, on the 13th of November. Time for us to sit down, take time out, and remember, not that they were slaves, but that they were brave. Some of them killed themselves rather. The song says, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my father and be free. And for me, they jumped over ships, they jump in sea, they kill themselves so that I can live. How dare us forgive those who have dehumanized us. So don't tell me that I'm a Christian and I must love and forgive. Until my oppressors understand what they've done, I'm not going to tell them I forgive them, because they're still doing it. Thank you.
How can you share the knowledge from the books that you have perused over the years?
I mean, one of the great privileges that the present generation has that I didn't have. And we used to have to send for our books from America. We used to get little snippets of things from America, and we would pass a book round, 3 of us, or we'd meet together in somebody's house, and we'd sit down and read. Now they have something in their hands. I know the mobile phone is dangerous as well, but you've got the mobile phone. Ignorance is not bliss, and our community is in a terrible state. We still have the demonic forces of shadism that's dividing us, and you know what I mean. But ignorance is not bliss. You've got the phone, and you have access to black history as never before. Please use it. And those names that I've mentioned, Ralph Ellison, Baldwin, they're all there. They are Invisible Man, James Baldwin. a great intellectual, a great prophet. He spoke so eloquently. And, you know, these books are full of his journey, his political views, the man who dared to speak up. He wrote poetry, Jimmy's Blues. Profound books these are. Just above my head. Go Tell It on the Mountain. These are all politically conscious. This is a man who was a prophet. And I don't say that lightly. I don't just tell you because I like them. This is a man who had such profound words. And your generation, you know, I'm ready, like many of us, my generation. We've done all that we can. I dare say I've got some more energies left in me and my intellect is still sharp. But I remember as a young person, it was to those who were older than myself I looked to and respected. And they respect me and I respected them. It is my job as an elder person now. I'm not old yet, so don't write me off. Is to enable you. My job and job of people like me to enable you to get knowledge. Knowledge is power. I'm telling you, if you don't have no knowledge of who you are, if you are not reading and thinking, then you will walk like an imbecile into our oppression. You will continue to participate unwittingly into oppression because knowledge will give you the power you need and the confidence you need. And we need young people who are confident and young people who have knowledge and yet successful in worldly terms. Yes, we need engineers, we need all of you in those things. But we also need young people who understand the nature of our society and the history that has shaped us. Because if you don't know it, we just perpetuate the myth that black people don't know themselves and black people only live for now. We have to live for the future as well. We need you. And we need you. You will do it differently to my generation because my generation said to my mother's generation, we're going to do it differently. And we did. We read because we were exposed to books. And you will have your different ways. But we must have the same aim. And the aim must be that our people will create and help to create a world in which we set the agenda for our lives, not being victims to other people's idea of who they think we are. So, power to your elbows. Please don't think because we are a certain age that we don't know nothing. We can both learn from each other. And I'm hoping that I'll always be here to listen to you and you listen to me. That way, we will find a new way of liberation. Liberation is vital, intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally, and we're not there yet. God bless.
Rev Eve Pitts.